This is day 96. We're reading through the whole Bible, and today we are on Judges 19 through 21. Let's go. Okay, so as we talk about Judges 19 through 21, we're closing out the book of Judges and talking about probably the worst account of Israel's behavior in the entire Bible. It is really terrible. One of the key things to recognize here is that it starts and ends with the same piece. This whole section, these 3 chapters are all connected. It's all part of the same story. It's indicative of the horrible place that Israel has gotten to just before the time of the prophet Samuel, and what we're going to see is Israel gets a king. The details of this are really important. At the very beginning, it says, in those days, when there was no king in Israel, and that's important. At the end of this, it's also going to say, when there was no king in Israel. In 21:25, the last verse of the book of Judges, in those days there was no king in Israel. Everyone did whatever seemed right to him. And when we read through this story, keep that in mind. The things they are doing are not the things that are right. It's whatever seems right to them. The rest of 19 verse 1 starts off telling us what a terrible state everything is in here. After it says there was no king in Israel, it talks about a Levite who was in the hill country in Ephraim, has a woman from Bethlehem in Judah as his concubine. Concubine would be like a wife, but not really a wife. There's some things he calls her dad, his father-in-law, that type of thing. But it's less than a wife still, more than just like a live-in girlfriend, but sort of like a common law marriage. It's kind of a snub to the ways that God has told them that they are to live. So this is indicative of Israel and of this Levite in this moment, not really living the way that they're supposed to. And he's a Levite. He is supposed to be representing the ways of the Lord, and he is not doing that properly. And so this is just another way of kind of reminding us of the decline of the people. And as we go through these chapters, it gets much worse than that. So let's talk about his visit to the father-in-law first. In 19, he goes and he visits the father-in-law. And this is a picture of hospitality in that time, the way it should be done. He welcomes his son-in-law in. The hope probably is to reconcile the marriage or the relationship and send her back with him, which apparently he does. She's kind of left out of this part of the story until later in the chapter. But what we see is he welcomes him in. He sort of demands that he stays with them. And then he keeps extending this hospitality to him. No, just stay a couple more days. Just stay another day. Just stay another day. And this would be culturally appropriate for somebody who's hosting. You would go out of your way to welcome somebody in and take care of them and then send them away fully loaded for their journey. And that's what he does. That picture of his hospitality, when theoretically, he had every reason not to welcome this guy in. This is something that is held in contrast to what the Levite will experience as he travels on. He finally decides, nope, I've got to travel on. We need to get moving. And so he packs up his servant, his donkeys, and apparently his concubine, and they leave. And they come to a town called Jebus, and where the Jebusites occupy. It's where Jerusalem will be eventually, but right now it's just Jebus. He decides, no, I'm not going to stay with them because they're not Israelites. They're foreigners. Let's go on. About 4 miles north of that is the town of Gibeah, which is in Benjamin now. So they're traveling beyond the borders of Judah and into Benjamin. And this is where we're going to really encounter the catalyzing moment that leads to the end of the book. From this point on, as soon as they arrive at Gibeah, especially if you were to read this in Hebrew, you would recognize some very familiar sounding language. But even to us reading in English, this should sound very familiar. It is almost word for word a copy of the passage in Genesis talking about Lot, the angels going after Lot's family, entering into Sodom and being confronted by wicked men of Sodom and being, brought out. No, you can't stay in the square. This isn't safe for you. You must come with me. Come into my house. All of these kinds of things are intentional parallels to Sodom, including what's going to happen next. But The entire account here is showing us how far Israel, and especially this town of Gibeah in Benjamin, how far this town has fallen. These are Israelites, and they're acting like Sodom, who Sodom and Gomorrah are famously talked about throughout Scripture as some of the worst sinners of all time. And here, people of the Lord are acting just like them. The wickedness of man has spread to that, has just declined to that level where it's just atrocious. The account here is disgusting. It's horrendous. It's layered with multiple angles of abuse and dehumanization and lack of concern. There are so many things wrong with this passage. We don't even have time to list them all out. For some reason, the man of the house and the Levite see the desire of the wicked men for the visiting man as a greater evil than releasing this man's virgin daughter and the concubine to them. So they do that. Every part of that was wrong. She is brutalized until she apparently passes out on the doorstep, and then as he goes to leave, she's non-responsive. The Levite shows no remorse, no interest. It's confusing to see why he went out of his way to go to his father-in-law's house, maybe to save face. But he was welcomed by the father-in-law, even though he apparently didn't care enough about her to have married her properly, and doesn't seem to be all that sad about this. In this moment, he just says, "Get up, let's go." When she doesn't, he takes her body and puts it on the donkey. It says later that he found her dead in the morning. And again, I'm kind of skipping some of these details. You can read through them, but I don't want to elaborate on them. They are just as bad as they seem to be here. And I apologize for any potential triggering or anything, but it's horrific and necessary to understand how badly they've fallen in this time. This is an honest depiction of where Israel was at in this time. He gets her back home, and then he does this atrocious thing to her. He cuts her into pieces, 12 pieces, and sends pieces of her all over Israel to every other tribe so that they would know what's happened. Apparently there's some sort of message, because it says nothing like this has ever happened or has been seen since the day the Israelites came out of the land of Egypt until now. Think it over, discuss it, and speak up. And so there seems to be some sort of message attached with it as well. He sends these packages all over Israel. They have some sort of message that not only describes what happened, but calls them to arms. And so they all gather, all the tribes of Israel show up to attack Benjamin. They send 400,000 troops up against Benjamin. As they go to battle with them, Benjamin sends all of their troops into the city of Gibeah to defend it. The Benjamites come out, the Israelites go forward, and they are inquiring of the Lord. Even though they're not righteous, they're still sort of checking with the Lord, and he is guiding them mostly as seemingly judgment against Benjamin, in the same way that the judgment against Sodom and Gomorrah was utter destruction. It comes pretty close for Benjamin here. They go to battle. They have a couple of clashes. They keep asking the Lord, should we keep doing this? Because Israel seems to be losing each time. It seems that there's judgment of the Lord, even though he is with them and guiding them into this. They're losing troops like crazy. They lose 22,000 the first day, and then another 18,000 the next attack, which is a tenth. So, I mean, in a way, they tithed the bodies. They tithed their personal wealth of humans. They sacrificed a tenth of their army in just trying to make these attacks work, and they're not working. But the Lord says, tomorrow I'll give them over to you. Do it again. And so he does. And they just about decimate Benjamin. Then they go into this city and they kill all of the women and everybody else. They take out so much of Benjamin that they just about eradicate the entire tribe. And they look at it and they've taken out so many people that even the men who are left, there's nobody for them to marry. There's no way for their tribe to continue. So they come up with a plan to get Benjamin some wives. They look around and they go, wait, somebody failed to meet with us at Mizpah. Was everybody there, or did some people fail to come? And they find that the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead did not come out. And so Israel's plan is they go and wipe out the entire village of Jabesh Gilead, and all of the unmarried virgins who are of age to marry, they take them and give them over to the men of Benjamin who are left. And there's not enough women to give to Benjamin for every man who needs a wife. And so then they go, now what do we do? Like, we still haven't done enough. And we have compassion on Benjamin, but not on Jabesh Gilead, and not on, they're overwhelmed by compassion again. And they go, oh, you know what else? Just north of here, on the way to Shiloh, there's going to be this procession where these virgin dancers are going in an honorary holiday to the Lord. And it's an annual festival, and they do it every time. Men of Benjamin who still need a wife, go and wait along the side of the road. And when you see these women, take them and kidnap them, and you can keep whichever woman you kidnap as your wife. And then they do that. And when they take the women away, the men come out, and, you know, their fathers and brothers and everything. And they say, like, we're not okay with this. And they say, hey, hang on. We had all sworn an oath that nobody would give their wives or daughters over to the men of Benjamin in marriage. And so we had to do something to give them women without breaking this vow to the Lord. There's nowhere in there that the Lord required that they do it this way. This is what they've chosen to do. And so it's their own mistake, their own failure to follow the Lord properly that got them into this mess and that created this weird situation. Their solution for it is fairly unrighteous. The plan is, since we had them steal these women, and we're just going to prevent you, fathers and brothers, from fighting and going after your daughters. And then you didn't break your vow, and we have now restored Benjamin. The whole thing is wretched. The whole thing is terrible. And then it concludes. In those days, there was no king in Israel. Everyone did whatever seemed right to him. It's crazy that the first king that they end up with is a guy from Benjamin. Saul comes from the tribe of Benjamin. Like, it's good. We're going to read Ruth first, and then we're going to get into Samuel. And so when we get into 1 Samuel and we see that, and we get to where there's a king, it's a little ways in. And so it's easy to lose track and forget which tribe and why Benjamin is significant. But keep that in mind as we think about King Saul comes from the tribe of Benjamin. That's the kind of lineage that he is coming out of. That's the type of legacy that he's coming from. As I process this and read through this, I just think in the midst of sin, in the midst of walking away from the Lord, it's crazy how much we can justify. It's crazy how many things that we can start to build up and act like this is okay and this is right. And oh, well, I still sort of called on the Lord here, so it must be fine. And I think that's an important heart check for us of, one, remembering that we can have compassion on those who have fallen away and are sinning and are deep in that where their perspective may be wrong. And we should have compassion for that. And we should have grace for that. But we also should not count that as an accurate perspective or try to pretend like somebody who is not walking with the Lord, even though they claim little bits and pieces, that they have a complete and accurate and righteous perspective on everything, when their life is displaying that they are definitely not walking with the Lord, and they are intentionally not walking with the Lord. I'd love to hear what stands out to you, and I would imagine there's some serious questions about all of this. So let's talk about that in the chat. Let's get into it. Thank you for reading with us. Be rad for Jesus.